I would just move on to the next speaker of the session. Dr. Sheena Ali, she is a young neurosurgeon from Chennai in India. She's also talking on a very interesting topic of syringomyelia, review of literature. Over to you, Dr. Sheena.
Good afternoon, esteemed dignitaries. I'm Dr. Sheena Ali. Today, I will be addressing the semi-controversial topic of the management of syrinx, its relationship to Kyrie malformations. Syrinx is a Greek word for a tube-like hollow organ. While syringomyelia is a culmination of tubular cavitations of the spinal cord extending over many segments, lined by glial tissue, hydromyelia is defined as an intramedullary cystic cavitation lined by ependymal cells. It was Milhorat and Badzov who were some of the first to classify this based on CSF hydrodynamics and its relationship to Kyrie and other spinal cord anomalies. Now, Kyrie is an assembly of disorders involving the rhombencephalon and the contents of the CV junction, first described by John Cleland and later confirmed on several postmortem examinations by Professor Hans Kyrie. It was ultimately Schwalbe and Gerdig who included Arnold in the eponym after Julius Arnold, the pathologist, described a single myelodysplastic patient with associated hindbrain herniation. We are all well aware of the newer types of Kyrie, including Kyrie 0 and 1.5, based on the CSF hydrodynamics. Kyrie shares a close relationship to the formation of syrinx, and it has been postulated and studied over several series and studies over the years, which are beyond the scope of this discussion. Predominantly a disease amongst children, Kyrie in adults is said to occur due to the arachnoid adhesions developing over a period of time and the mechanical insult causing hindrance to the CSF flow. Stevens further postulated the tendency to develop a syrinx more in moderate hindbrain herniations. This disease is well known for its insidious onset with the male predominance. The cervical area is usually the most frequently affected, and acute presentations are further observed with brainstem involvement. It can run its clinical course from a simple suboccipital headache to features of cerebellar dysfunction to ataxia to bulbar palsies. A review of literature in the JNS in 2013 defined the unclear correlation between these two. It divided Kyrie 1 into oligosymptomatic and symptomatic, while the symptomatic was further divided into cerebellar, spinal, brainstem, cortical, and systemic complaints. Though Kyrie has a sporadic distribution, there have been cases of familial Kyrie as reported in this article in 2005 and subsequent case series in 2011. While no specific gene could be linked convincingly, the chromosome 9 and chromosome 15 are the only confirmed genes. Reports of strange presentations like this one in child's neurosurgery about cruciate hemiplegia was reported in 2017, and paroxysmal rhythmical pelvic movements were reported in another article by the same journal in 2020. It has been a topic of concern in pregnancy, a physiological state of consequential raised ICP. However, it has shown good results in the small study of 7 patients. Several studies, including this case report in 2001, has shown how observation alone has helped in the spontaneous resolution, with no intervention required in asymptomatic patients. Several discussions regarding its pathogenesis and progression are still being debated upon, with convincing proof of atlantoaxial instability by none other than Dr. Atul Goyal sir, which is definitely beyond the scope of this discussion. Ultimately, it comes down to a good clinical acumen and the advances in radiological imaging, namely the use of the sign MRI sequencing. We are familiar with the common and expected MRI findings in the various types of Kyrie malformations with and without syringomyelia. Here is a sign MRI showing how much easier it is to dynamically assess the CSF flow. Coming to its controversial management, studies so far have concluded the wait and watch concept for asymptomatic cases with a regular follow-up, while surgery is beneficial for those with progressively enlarging syrinxes with or without clinical deterioration. However, the ultimate goal has remained the same over the years, which is to relieve the compression and re-establish the CSF flow. FMDs have so far remained the gold standard, and other shunting procedures like the syringoperitoneal and pleural shunts and syringosubarachnoid shunts too. Several studies have advised conservative management in asymptomatic cases due to the heterogeneous symptomatology and clinical course. A survey was done, wherein the evaluation of treatment options was done. 246 questionnaires were distributed, and only 76 were completed and returned. There was a consensus that no operation should be carried out in asymptomatic patients with Kyrie-1 malformations, unless there is an associated syringomyelia, and in those with scoliosis, irrespective whether or not they have syrinx. Suboccipital decompression was the surgery of choice with the use of pericranial grafts or synthetic dural grafts. In cases of recurrence, they all advise shunting procedures, namely the peritoneal shunt. This article in 2019 by Child Nervous System also backed the article, suggesting those with brainstem dysfunction and lower cranial nerve abnormalities would warrant surgery. But what about the technique? In 2019, this SNI article of 26 patients showed an improvement in 76.9% with complications in only 23% when a small suboccipital decompression FMD was done of 2 into 2 centimeters, and the medianmost part of the C1 arch was excised. The Parkes-Reeves Consortium for Syringomyelia in 2021 studied PFD with autografts and non-autografts. Synthetic grafts were namely better, especially in preventing leaks, pseudomeningoceles, and meningitis. Other add-on procedures too have their pluses and minuses. It was either done in the same or as a reduced surgery. The syringoperitoneal shunt is said to be the best out of all the shunting procedures, as shown in this article here. Here are some suggestions so far based on literature, and one can adopt this algorithm as per the surgeon's choice. Here is more evidence from literature showing good surgical outcome, which I have summed up further up ahead. The C1-C2 stabilization, which had been put forth by none other than Dr. Atul Goyal himself. A study was done, which was a long-term study of 39 years and 20 months, where only fixation was done. They noted a good clinical and radiological outcome. I have summed up the post-surgical outcomes here, which have shown an exponential improvement, namely the exertional headache, as well as the mixed cerebellar brainstem symptoms and the spinal cord symptoms. Here you can see the other symptoms, which were like the motor strength and sensation. The pain showed more of an improvement rather than worsening. Even the long-term studies with the older studies, like which were done by Badsoff, also showed good improvement. And a study from India, a 10-year clinical outcome study at AIIMS, they showed that the Williams procedure, when they adopted the Williams procedure, they noted a better clinical outcome. So could there be any other options in treatment of this disease? So here's a case report of a patient with B-cell lymphoma who was treated with intrathecal bleomycin. This was published in the Journal of Neurosurgery in December 20. While this appears to be the only reported case, there is still a long way to go in testing its efficacy. Also, what can be done in a failed PFD? This 2018 article studies the options in how to tackle this problem. And it spoke about options like doing a redo FMD, shunting procedures, and close observation and follow-up. So what is the real deal about the controversy surrounding this disease? Could it just be the natural pathoprogression of this disease, which is a natural protective response secondary to the atlantoaxial instability? Or could it be because of the lax cerebellar tonsils or the adhesions caused by the duroplasty? Or could it even be due to the difference in the management in the Western and Eastern ideologies? Professor Sami has put forth some of his ideas to counteract this, wherein he has spoken about doing a limited small craniectomy of around 2 into 2 centimeters and the use of synthetic and artificial grafts, along with a change in technique using sharper dissection to prevent these adhesions. This was backed up by Hawley and Badsoff. They also supported the small partial suboccipital craniectomy. Finally, I would like to conclude with Neil deGrasse Tyson's apt quote: Kyrie and its relationship to syrinx is a vast topic of discussion and is still in the process of being implicit. The more we know, the lesser we still know. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Sheena, for that interesting presentation. And yeah, like you rightly said, the more we know, the lesser we know is
Yes, ma'am.
true.
Yes,
in
ma'am.
most of the spinal pathologies, and that was clearly, I think, seen in most of the talks that we had today.
Yes, ma'am.
Whether it be degenerative spine or OPLL or pediatric congenital malformations or even the use of implants.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
thank everybody over here for making this session a good success, and thank you for joining us in this session. If there are any comments or any words, Suchanda ma'am.
Yeah, I think I should thank you for taking up this thing and getting a session dedicated to the women. Shraddha, you have done a tremendous job and trying to encourage everyone. And excuse us, all people, where we could not have a florid discussion because the organizers are at the back ringing up Shraddha to wind up the session. So I think that's the reason. But definitely there are a lot of such good quality presentations and a lot of food for thought. And I think with that, I would like to sum up until unless the organizers are there and have to speak something. Otherwise, so bye-bye to everyone till we meet again.
Yeah.
And, would like to meet in person, definitely. Okay,
yes.
bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.